There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot touch. You know this feeling. You go to bed early. You try to rest. You take time away from your responsibilities. And yet something inside you remains tired. It is not your body asking for relief. It is something much deeper. It is the soul becoming weary of carrying a life that no longer fits. Many people fear this exhaustion. They interpret it as weakness, failure, or a sign that they have somehow lost their way. But I would ask you to consider another possibility. What if your exhaustion is not evidence that you are broken? What if it is evidence that an old chapter within you is coming to an end? The human being is not meant to remain the same forever. There are identities we wear for years, roles we perform, expectations we obey, masks we create to survive. At first, these identities seem necessary. They help us belong. They protect us from rejection. They allow us to move through the world with certainty. But there comes a moment when the soul begins to rebel. You wake up, and the things that once excited you no longer do. Conversations that once felt meaningful suddenly feel empty. You continue your routines, yet something within you whispers, "This is no longer who you are." And that whisper slowly becomes exhaustion. I have seen people fight this feeling with all their strength. They force themselves to keep going exactly as before. They cling to old ambitions, old relationships, old versions of themselves. They believe that if they simply work harder, push more, and refuse to change, the discomfort will disappear. But the discomfort remains. Because the exhaustion was never caused by a lack of effort. It was caused by carrying something that has already reached its end. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase for many years. At first, the weight seems manageable. Then your arms begin to ache. Eventually, every step becomes difficult. The solution is not to become stronger so that you can carry it forever. The solution is to realize that you no longer need to carry it at all. The psyche works in much the same way. There are beliefs that once protected you, but now imprison you. There are fears that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. There are identities that once helped you survive, but now prevent you from becoming who you are meant to be. The exhaustion you feel may simply be the soul saying, "I cannot continue carrying this old life." And perhaps this is why you have felt different lately. Perhaps you have become less interested in proving yourself. Perhaps you no longer wish to chase every opportunity. Perhaps certain relationships have begun to lose their hold over you. Perhaps your desire to constantly struggle and fight has faded. Do not mistake this for laziness. A deep transformation often begins with a strange kind of weariness. The old self becomes tired because its work is finished. Nature itself teaches us this lesson. The tree does not cling to its leaves forever. There comes a season when it lets them fall. To an outside observer, the tree may appear empty, lifeless, even weakened. Yet something important is happening. It is conserving its energy for a new season. You, too, may be standing in such a season. The world may tell you to push harder, to become more productive, to ignore your inner signals. But there are moments when wisdom asks for something entirely different. It asks you to become still enough to hear what your exhaustion is trying to say. Perhaps it is telling you that a chapter of striving is ending. Perhaps it is telling you that an old wound no longer needs to define you. Perhaps it is telling you that the person you once had to be is not the person you are becoming. Every ending feels uncomfortable because the mind fears the unknown. It would rather hold on to familiar pain than step into unfamiliar freedom. Yet every meaningful transformation requires a kind of death. Not the death of the body, but the death of an old identity. This is why exhaustion often arrives before relief. You are tired because you are standing at the edge of becoming someone new. The life that once demanded all of your energy is slowly releasing its grip on you. And when you finally stop fighting to remain who you no longer are, you will discover that your exhaustion was never your enemy. It was the first sign that an old chapter was ending, and a gentler one was about to begin. There are moments in life when everything becomes strangely quiet. The calls slow down. The opportunities that once seemed within reach suddenly disappear. Certain relationships become distant. Even your own emotions seem to retreat into silence. It is as though the world has stepped back from you, leaving you alone in a room with your thoughts. Most people fear this silence. They assume that nothing is happening. They interpret the stillness as rejection, abandonment, or a sign that life has forgotten them. The human mind is uncomfortable with empty spaces. It wants movement, answers, and immediate proof that everything is progressing. When those things disappear, anxiety begins to grow. But I have learned that the most important changes in a person's life often begin in silence. Consider nature. Before dawn breaks, there is a deep quiet over the earth. Before a seed pushes through the soil, it spends a long time hidden in darkness. Before a new season arrives, the old one slowly loses its strength in almost complete stillness. Transformation rarely announces itself with noise. Instead, it enters quietly. Perhaps this explains why some of you have felt unsettled lately. There are periods when life seems to pause. You keep asking yourself, why has everything become so still? Why does it feel as though I am waiting for something I cannot yet see? The answer may be simpler than you think. The silence is not empty. The silence is preparing you. Human beings are constantly becoming. The person you are today is not the same person you were years ago, nor will you be the same person a year from now. Yet between one version of yourself and the next, there is often a strange and uncomfortable space. The old life begins to lose its meaning, but the new life has not yet appeared. This in-between place can feel lonely. It can feel confusing. It can even feel frightening, because you no longer recognize the direction of your own journey. You stand between two worlds, one that is ending and another that has not yet begun. Many people panic here. They rush to fill the silence with distractions. They make impulsive decisions. They return to old habits simply because they cannot tolerate uncertainty. They would rather live in familiar discomfort than sit quietly and allow something new to emerge. But if you interrupt this silence too quickly, you may miss its purpose. For silence has its own language. It asks you to stop running. It asks you to observe. It asks you to listen to the parts of yourself that have been drowned out by noise. Some of the greatest truths about your life do not arrive when everything is busy and exciting. They arrive when the world becomes quiet enough for you to hear your own soul. Perhaps this is why certain things have recently fallen away from your life. Perhaps doors have closed. Perhaps plans have changed. Perhaps people you thought would remain forever have slowly drifted into the distance. You may see these things as losses. But what if they are actually invitations? What if life is removing distractions so that you can finally see what truly matters? The silence that precedes transformation often feels like emptiness, because the old structures of your life are dissolving. The identities you relied upon are becoming too small for the person you are becoming. The ambitions that once motivated you no longer satisfy you. The paths you once intended for you to follow suddenly seem less certain. This is not failure. This is preparation. A new chapter cannot fully enter your life while every corner of your mind remains occupied by the old one. Space must first be created, and space is often created through silence. There are times when it appears that nothing is happening, when your efforts seem unanswered and your questions remain unresolved. Yet beneath the surface, something profound is taking place. Parts of your inner world are rearranging themselves. New understanding is forming. A deeper version of yourself is beginning to awaken. You cannot always see these changes immediately. A tree does not grow louder as its roots deepen. A river does not announce that it is changing course. And the soul does not always reveal its transformation in ways that the eyes can easily recognize. This is why patience becomes essential during seasons of silence. Trust that not every pause is a punishment. Trust that not every delay is a denial. Trust that there are moments when life becomes quiet because something sacred is taking shape beyond your current understanding. One day you will look back on this silence and realize that it was not the absence of movement at all. It was the gentle space in which your next chapter was being prepared. There comes a moment in every life when a person grows tired of pretending. Not the kind of tiredness that comes from work or responsibility, but a deeper weariness that arises from being someone they are not. It is a quiet exhaustion that cannot easily be explained, because, from the outside, everything may appear perfectly fine. The person is functioning, succeeding, and fulfilling expectations. Yet inside, there is a growing sense that something essential has been lost. Many people spend years trying to become what they believe they should be. They wear the identities that others have given them. They become who their family expects, who society rewards, who their fears demand they become. They learn to smile when they wish to speak honestly. They learn to remain silent when their soul longs to express itself. They learn to hide their desires, their creativity, their sensitivity, and even their pain. Over time, these small acts of hiding become a way of life. The tragedy is not that people wear masks. We all wear them at times. The tragedy is that many forget they are wearing them at all. And then something begins to happen. The things that once satisfied them no longer bring joy. Achievements feel strangely empty. Relationships become exhausting. The future they worked so hard to create suddenly feels full, foreign. They cannot understand why they are restless because, by all appearances, they have done everything correctly. But the soul is asking a question that cannot be ignored forever. Is this truly who you are? This question is uncomfortable because it asks us to look beyond the life we have built and examine the person living inside it. Many of us fear this examination. We fear that if we are honest with ourselves, we may have to change. We may have to let go of old identities, old ambitions, and old ways of being. We may discover that we have been living according to expectations that were never truly our own. So we resist. We continue playing our roles. We keep saying yes when we mean no. We keep chasing things that no longer call to us. We remain loyal to an image of ourselves that has quietly expired. And this resistance creates suffering, not because life is punishing us, but because something within us longs to be genuine. The human spirit cannot remain divided forever. There is only so long that you can ignore your deeper nature before it begins to call you back. Perhaps this is what you have been feeling. Perhaps your restlessness is not a problem to solve, but a message to understand. Perhaps your weariness comes from carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits. There is a profound relief that enters a person's life when they stop fighting their own nature. It does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it enters softly. Like the first breath, after holding it for too long, you suddenly realize that you no longer need to prove yourself to everyone. You no longer need to become what others expect. You no longer need to force yourself into places where your spirit cannot breathe. There is great freedom in this realization. For many years, people search for peace in achievements, possessions, and external validation. Yet peace often arrives in a much simpler way. It comes when you stop abandoning yourself. The person you truly are has been waiting patiently beneath every role, every fear, and every expectation. And that person does not demand perfection. That person asks only for honesty. To live honestly is not to reject responsibility or disregard others. It is to allow your inner life and your outer life to begin moving in the same direction. It is to stop saying one thing while feeling another. It is to stop living according to a script that no longer belongs to you. This process requires courage because authenticity always asks for sacrifice. You may have to release old identities. You may disappoint people who benefited from the version of you that never spoke its truth. You may have to step away from paths that once seemed certain. But something beautiful happens when you do. The struggle begins to ease. The endless inner conflict begins to quiet. The energy that was once spent maintaining false versions of yourself becomes available for living. And this is why the chapter ahead may feel like relief. Not because all of your problems suddenly disappear, not because life becomes perfect, but because you are no longer carrying the exhausting burden of pretending to be someone you are not. The deepest form of peace comes when you finally give yourself permission to become who you have always been. If I were to ask you what part of your life changed you the most, you would probably not speak of your easiest days. You would not remember the moments when everything went according to plan, when every door opened and every desire was fulfilled. No. The moments that shape a human being are often the moments they once wished had never happened. It is the season of uncertainty, the season of waiting. The season when you lost something you thought you could not live without. The season when your plans collapsed and your certainties disappeared. At the time, these experiences feel cruel. They seem like interruptions to the life you wanted to build. You ask yourself why things have become so difficult. You wonder why the path has become so steep when all you wanted was peace. But there is something the suffering mind rarely understands in the moment. Pain is not always the destruction of your life. Sometimes it is the construction of your deeper self. I have seen people emerge from hardship with a wisdom they could never have gained through comfort. I have seen sorrow soften the heart of someone who once knew only pride. I have seen disappointment awaken a person to possibilities they would never have considered if everything had gone according to their plans. The experiences we resist often contain the lessons we most need. This does not mean that suffering is pleasant. It is not. There is nothing romantic about heartbreak, loneliness, betrayal, or loss. These experiences wound us. They bring us face to face with our fears and expose parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. Yet they also do something else. They remove illusions. When life becomes difficult, we begin to see what truly matters. The unnecessary begins to fall away. The distractions lose their power. We stop chasing certain things because we realize they never had the ability to satisfy us. Pain has a way of simplifying life. And in that simplicity, we often discover ourselves. Perhaps you have been through a season that seemed to stretch on endlessly. A period where you felt forgotten, misunderstood, or exhausted by carrying burdens that no one else could see. Perhaps there were nights when you wondered whether things would ever become easier. If so, do not believe that those experiences were meaningless. No sincere suffering is wasted. Every difficult season leaves something behind: patience, humility, compassion, strength, a deeper understanding of yourself and of others. The person who has suffered and reflected upon that suffering becomes different. They begin to see life with greater depth. They become less concerned with appearances and more concerned with truth. They learn that people carry hidden struggles and that every human being deserves gentleness. This is why difficult seasons often prepare us for a different kind of life, not merely a better life, but a wiser one. The person who has never known darkness often chases things that do not matter. But the person who has walked through darkness begins to appreciate simple things. A quiet morning, a kind word, a peaceful mind. They understand the value of relief because they have known the weight of struggle. And perhaps this is why you are being prepared for a new chapter. The chapter ahead may not feel extraordinary because of great achievements or dramatic changes. It may feel extraordinary because of what you have become through your hardships. There is a certain peace that only suffering can teach. It is the peace of knowing that you survived what once seemed impossible. It is the peace of realizing that your worth was never dependent on circumstances. It is the peace that comes when you no longer fear every difficulty because you have already endured so much and discovered your own resilience. Many people wish they could erase their painful chapters. They imagine that life would have been better without them. But I wonder, would you possess the same wisdom? Would you carry the same compassion? Would you understand yourself as deeply as you do now? The difficult season you endured may have been shaping qualities that comfort could never produce. It may have been teaching you to trust your inner strength. It may have been breaking your attachment to things that no longer belonged in your life. It may have been preparing you for the peace you are now approaching. For relief is most deeply felt by those who have carried heavy burdens. The dawn is most beautiful to the one who has walked through the night. And the chapter that is beginning to open before you may feel so gentle, so peaceful, and so deeply welcome, because your struggles have quietly transformed you into someone who can finally receive it. The pain was not the end of your story. It was preparing you for the peace that comes next. There are moments in life that seem too meaningful to be dismissed as mere accidents. You think of someone you have not spoken to in years, and suddenly they appear in your life. A particular message keeps repeating itself through different people and different circumstances. A symbol, a phrase, or a certain idea follows you everywhere you go, as though something invisible is trying to capture your attention. Most people experience these moments and quickly move on. They They explain them away as coincidence and return to their routines. But there are times when life seems to speak in a language that is different from logic. There are moments when the outer world and the inner world begin to mirror one another in mysterious ways. These moments often appear when a person is standing at the edge of transformation. You may have noticed this in your own life. Perhaps certain conversations have arrived exactly when you needed them. Perhaps books, ideas, or opportunities have appeared with remarkable timing. Perhaps people have entered your path, carrying precisely the wisdom you were searching for. At first, these experiences seem small, yet something inside you recognizes their significance. You feel that they are pointing towards something, even if you cannot yet explain what it is. This is because the soul often senses change before the conscious mind understands it. Long before a new chapter fully arrives, subtle signs begin to emerge. They do not force themselves upon you. They do not shout. They appear gently, inviting you to pay attention. The difficulty is that many people are too distracted to notice. They move through life with such urgency that they overlook the quiet messages hidden within ordinary moments. They become so focused on controlling every outcome that they forget to observe what life is already revealing to them. But transformation requires a different attitude. It requires attention. It asks you to become curious. It asks you to slow down long enough to notice that life may be arranging certain experiences in ways that are deeply meaningful. I have often observed that when a person is approaching an important inner change, they begin encountering symbols that reflect their own development. A person learning courage repeatedly encounters stories of bravery. Someone who is preparing to release the past suddenly finds reminders everywhere that encourage letting go. Someone who is approaching peace begins meeting people and experiences that gently direct them towards stillness. These moments are not commands. They are invitations. They are reminders that your inner life and your outer life are beginning to move toward one another. Perhaps this is why some of you feel that certain things have been happening with unusual timing. There may be experiences that seem impossible to explain. There may be moments that leave you with the strange feeling that something is changing beneath the surface of your life. Do not dismiss these feelings too quickly. The human being is not merely a creature of logic. There is also intuition, symbolism, and a deeper layer of experience that often reveals itself through meaningful patterns. The soul speaks in symbols because some truths cannot be expressed in ordinary language. A dream, a repeated image, an unexpected encounter. These things can awaken something within you that reason alone cannot reach. And often, they appear during periods of transition because the old self is beginning to loosen its grip while the new self is quietly emerging. You may not yet know where this process is leading. You may still feel uncertain. But uncertainty does not mean that nothing is happening. There are seasons when life seems to send small confirmations that you are moving in the right direction. They arrive unexpectedly, offering a sense of reassurance that cannot be fully explained. These moments do not remove all fear. They do not provide every answer, but they do something equally important. They remind you that your journey possesses meaning. They remind you that your life is not merely a series of disconnected events, and they encourage you to remain open to the possibility that something deeper is unfolding. Perhaps the reason certain signs keep appearing is not because you need more information. Perhaps it is because you need more trust. Trust that your difficult season has not been without purpose. Trust that your inner transformation is real, even if it cannot yet be seen. Trust that the chapter you are approaching is already beginning to announce itself in quiet and mysterious ways. For before a new chapter fully opens, life often leaves small traces along the path. And those who pay attention begin to realize that relief sometimes arrives with signs, long before it arrives with answers. One of the greatest burdens a human being can carry is the belief that everything must be controlled. We try to control how others see us, how quickly our lives progress, when opportunities arrive, and how our future unfolds. We create plans, we hold tightly to expectations, and we convince ourselves that if we can simply manage every detail, then we will finally feel safe. But life has a curious way of challenging this belief. Again and again, it places us in situations that cannot be controlled. A relationship changes despite our efforts to preserve it. A door closes just as we were preparing to walk through it. The future we carefully imagined suddenly begins to take a different shape. In these moments, we often suffer twice. First, because of the event itself, and second, because we cannot accept that it lies beyond our control. The mind craves certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants to know exactly when things will improve, and precisely how every chapter will unfold. Yet some of the deepest suffering in life comes not from uncertainty itself, but from our resistance to it. We exhaust ourselves trying to force life to move according to our own timetable. We cling to old plans because they feel familiar. We attempt to hold together situations that are already changing. And while our hands remain tightly closed around what we think should happen, we cannot receive what is actually trying to enter our lives. There is a certain wisdom that arrives only after repeated disappointment. It is the realization that not everything needs to be forced. Not every answer needs to arrive immediately. Not every path needs to be planned in advance. There comes a moment when a person begins to understand that life possesses its own rhythm, and that peace often begins when we stop struggling against it. Perhaps this is the lesson your recent season has been teaching you. Perhaps you have tried to control things that were never yours to carry. You may have tried to force an outcome, to hold onto a relationship, to determine the exact shape of your future, or to solve every uncertainty before it had time to reveal its meaning. And perhaps this effort has left you tired, not because you are weak, but because the human spirit was never meant to carry the impossible burden of controlling everything. There is relief in accepting that some things must unfold in their own time. A seed cannot be forced to grow by pulling on its roots. The dawn cannot be hurried by demanding that the sun rise sooner. The seasons do not ask for our permission before they change, and neither does the deeper movement of life. This does not mean becoming passive or abandoning responsibility. It does not mean refusing to make choices or surrendering your ability to act. Rather, it means recognizing the difference between what can be guided and what must simply be allowed. There is wisdom in effort, but there is also wisdom in release. Many people know how to strive, but few know how to let go. Few know how to trust that not every delay is a failure, and not every closed door is a punishment. Few know how to remain patient when life seems to be moving in ways they do not understand. Yet some of the most beautiful chapters of life arrive only after we stop insisting that they appear according to our own design. Think of the moments that transformed you most deeply. Many of them likely arrived unexpectedly. You did not plan every meaningful encounter. You did not predict every opportunity that changed your direction. You did not foresee every lesson that shaped your character. Life often gives its greatest gifts through surprise. And surprise becomes impossible when we demand complete control. Perhaps this is why the chapter ahead feels different. You are beginning to loosen your grip. You are becoming less interested in forcing outcomes and more willing to trust the unfolding of your own journey. The need to have every answer is fading. The urge to carry every burden is growing weaker. You are beginning to understand that peace does not come from mastering every circumstance. It comes from learning which burdens no longer belong to you. There is a remarkable lightness that enters a person's life when they stop trying to manage the entire future. The mind becomes quieter. The heart becomes softer. The endless tension of needing to know everything begins to dissolve. And in that space, something beautiful emerges: trust. Not blind optimism, but a quiet confidence that life can continue unfolding even when you cannot yet see the entire path. This trust does not remove uncertainty. It transforms your relationship with it. You no longer see the unknown as an enemy. You begin to see it as a place where new possibilities can appear. And perhaps this is why the chapter before you feels so close, because the doors that are opening ahead require empty hands, and you are finally learning to let go. There is a